Hi everyone, this is Ezra. Thanks so much for listening to Proles at the Round Table. Because we enjoy making the show so much and want to be able to do even more with it, we'd like to announce our Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/prolespod, that's again patreon.com/prolespod, you can become a Patreon for as low as $1 a month. We have a bunch of rewards for our Patreons, including access to our secret Discord server to choosing a topic for us to do an episode on, and being able to listen in on a recording session. The money we get will go straight back into the podcast, allowing us to do more and more with it. We hope you enjoyed this episode on the Paris Commune, and thanks again to our friends at Coffee with Comrades.
Welcome to Proles of the Round Table.
Hello and welcome to Proles of the Round Table, where we sit down, have a few drinks, and discuss leftist history. Make sure you like and subscribe on your favorite podcast app, rate and review to expand our reach. Our sponsor this evening is Macron's Macaroons, without which we would not have these lovely mics. Macron's Macaroons, now with 30% more neoliberalism. Tonight with us, we have Bree and Pearson from Coffee with Comrades. Bree, what are you drinking tonight?
Hey, I've got chocolate milk from my kitchen. It's delicious.
It's and then Pearson, what are you having?
I am on brand. I'm drinking coffee. I went to a local roaster earlier this week once we set out the date to come on and talk with you guys, and I picked up a Ethiopian coffee. It's called the Limu Shefe El Fete, and the notes are ripe blackberry and sugarcane, and it is real fucking good.
Excellent. I am drinking myself, Jeremy. I guess I should say my name. I'm drinking Modelo Especial because I was trying to keep the ABVs down because I knew that I would be drinking alcohol tonight and Coffee with Comrades would not. And I wanted to try to remain as clear-headed as possible. Justin, what are you drinking?
I did not make that sound decision. So I got it's a new one. It's called the Coriolis Effect, and it's by New Image Brewing. It's an IPA, and it's 6.5, so yikes.
That's not terrible.
It will be in about an hour and a half.
You'll be okay.
This is as we were discussing in the bullshit before the recording began, we're going to end up getting stupider and stupider, and the Coffee with Comrades are going to get smarter and smarter with their caffeine input. So
Perfect.
Should be a great time. So we're gonna kind of do something a little bit different this go round on our podcast and begin the way that Coffee with Comrades does, which is kind of a nice little conversation. I thought it was neat. So what's going on in y'all's personal lives?
Yeah, Bree, you want to take it first?
Sure. First off, thanks for having us, you guys. We're super excited.
Yeah,
Of course.
So are we.
This is really cool. I feel a little put on the spot right about now. Nothing much, just had a long day at work, and I have a really, really stupidly long commute. And I have to go on this terrible highway. It's called I-4 that's been under construction for the past 500 years. And there was a fun sign that I drove under, one of those where they can change what it says, and sometimes it'll be don't text and drive, or click it or ticket. Do you guys have those where you
Yes.
live? Okay, perfect. Yeah, so it's one of those signs, and it was don't drive drowsy. And I was like, fuck you, dude, I'm tired.
I feel like that is
Don't tell me what to do, sign.
Right.
Also-
No gods, no masters, no bulletin board.
but also who the fuck is not drowsy under capitalism?
Right, it's
who is not unable to sleep at night as an adult?
Right.
It's gonna.
Heard
It was
that, dude.
5 o'clock or 5:30, so everybody was on their commute, and I'm just like, what a really, what a stupendous fuck you to the workers of Orlando.
Right.
Just like, don't drive while sleepy. What about you, Pearson? How are you?
I'm good. Today has been pretty chill. So I'm a nerd, as anyone who listens to Coffee with Comrades will know, and the Switch finally got the port for one of my favorite games, which is called Hyper Light Drifter, which is this like Zelda knockoff, but it's a beautiful and a really fun game that's like doesn't have any dialogue, but is told through the narration of the characters on screen. But like the whole idea, the whole motif is that like it's about a guy who is dying, and the entire game was created by this guy who was dying. Anyway, it's really great. It's a really great game. I'm excited that it's like on Switch, so I can like walk around and play it on campus.
Nice.
I also went to class today, and interestingly enough, we were talking about modernist poetry, and specifically we were talking about some of the fascist poets. So we were talking about like Ezra Pound and what his name is. I literally just talked about him, and it's not coming to me. We talked about Ezra Pound. We talked about Marinetti, and we talked about sort of how the fascist creep sort of crawls sinisterly along by parroting aspects of both the left and the right.
Sure.
And it was really a really interesting discussion, and really disturbing. And it made me think that like if the alt-right possessed the capabilities of like Ezra Pound,
Sure.
or Marinetti or Yates or some of these proto-fascist or outright fascist figures, then we'd be in deep shit right now. And so I'm fucking glad that the best that the alt-right can seem to muster is shitting on Star Wars.
It's like I've thought about this a lot. Like they're the only thing that's currently missing, because there's a massive fascist uprising happening not just in the U.S. but globally.
Mm-hmm.
Like all they need is a leader who is both charismatic and an ideologue. Like not somebody who's like Milo, who's an irony boy as much as he is like an alt-right golden child, and not like Jordan Peterson's watered down nerdy ass, like somebody who is like out there, able to communicate effectively, get their point across, and is also charismatic and believes in this stuff. So,
no, I shudder to think what might come after Donald Trump.
Right.
Trump is a megalomaniac who is not tethered to any ideological mores, and if someone actually would arrive on the global stage who actually had a vision of what fascism could be, then it could be an absolute total fucking disaster, because
Definitely.
fascism is built around subservience and being subsumed by this authoritarian despot. I mean, it's written into the sort of hyper-masculine, patriarchal, chauvinistic, hyper-patriotic, or hyper-nationalistic rather, fervor that is so endemic to fascist ideology, and it would be terrifying to think of someone who actually could string two words together and have them make some semblance of sense, unlike our current Oompa Loompa president.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So in my own personal life,
Do it up.
Jesus, I don't even know where to begin. I slept 3 hours last night.
That's brutal.
Like Wednesday, so I'm a parent, so I've got children. So there's that, and then I also have 2 different part-time jobs. So there's that, and then I'm also a full-time student. And on Wednesdays, I have an 8 a.m. class and also a 7:30 p.m. class that doesn't get out till 10 o'clock. And then I also have work in between.
Oh.
So the fact that I'm even remotely coherent at this moment is amazing, because I will get to the end of my day on Wednesday and I'll be like, don't drink an energy drink. Don't do it. And then I'm like, but I can't stay awake. I'm going to fall asleep in class. And then I get one and then I regret it. And then I can't sleep until the end anyway. So that's what's going on currently in my exciting life.
That's
I mean,
brutal, man.
It's not all bad. Like, this is, I have 2 more semesters to go. I'll be doing my anthropology thesis this semester and my history thesis next semester, and then I'm going to go on to grad school because I can't stop and hate myself. Yeah. So I want to punish myself as much as possible.
Fuck yeah, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. Justin.
I just finished moving, and I've been doing a bunch of unpacking, so it's not very exciting talk, but but yeah, that's basically what I've been doing. At work, I'm essentially a trainer, and we've had like a job fair for the past 2 days, so that's kind of been wacky. But yeah, I mean, aside from that, just trying to adjust to a new place and trying to find all my stuff, which is really annoying.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Love moving.
Yep. Other than that, I'm pretty good.
Not bad.
Nice.
So we're going to move on now to some current events. What do you guys have for us?
So I have 2, and anybody who's listened to our show will sense some common threads. But there were 2 stories that kind of stuck out to me over the last couple of days that were like both well written and also deeply tied to issues that like I care about a lot. So the first one is actually in Bree and I's home state of Florida. For those of your listeners who don't know, Florida is actually one of the primary states in which felons have no right to vote. About 25% of the entire entirety of the United States who can't vote exist in Florida, and it's because they are felons. And if you had to venture a guess, what group do you think that most affects?
Straight white males would be
Bingo.
People who are like in higher socioeconomic brackets, probably, arrested for white collar crimes generally. Yeah, Mormons.
It would be a wonderful, or not, maybe not a wonderful world, but it would be a fair sight of a better world if that was true. But alas, it is actually people of color who are sort of constitutionally disenfranchised, and there is a lot of hullabaloo, and there's been a lot of grassroots organizing around getting what's called Amendment 4 onto the Florida Constitution, which is a constitutional ballot measure meant to restore the voting rights to an estimated 1.5 million Floridians who have fully completed their felony sentences. So they're people who have already finished their sentences. They're people who are convicted for nonviolent crimes and crimes that are not of a sexual nature. And so the reading from The Intercept's article titled "Florida has been stealing votes from black people since the Civil War. That could change in November." This November, voters will have a chance to reserve that weighing in on Amendment 4, a constitutional ballot measure to restore the voting rights of an estimated 1.5 million Floridians. Amendment 4 is the result of years of grassroots work by Florida organizers, but it's also part of a recent nationwide push on this front. And what's interesting, I think, about this particular story is that it's being picked up now by the fucking Democrats. That's the thing about it that's most interesting to me, is that how liberals will parrot and take on grassroots organizers' work and take like one specific thing in order to further their agenda and further their electoral aims. So there's this guy named Andrew Gillum who is actually the former mayor of Tallahassee, which is the city in which I now live and attend school. Right. And he just had a so-called insurgent primary run in the Democratic Party, which he won, and he is now contending to become the Florida governor, and he is in support of Amendment 4. Now, what's really interesting then is to tie this into the prison strike, which is something that Bree and I have talked about on Coffee with Comrades for a while, and it's something that is obviously really important, and a lot of meaningful work has been going on from the Incarcerated Workers Committee. And what I'm interested in specifically is this is one of the primary aims of the prison strike in order to reinstate the right for all incarcerated people to be able to vote, which is something that doesn't happen in Florida. And you can say what you will about electoralism and electoral politics, but that's not as much as what I'm concerned about. What I am concerned about is that, like, this is a fundamental thing that should be connected to the prison strike that's going on right now, this prison strike to abolish slavery, and yet that is not the way that it's being framed. And I think that it's important for us on the left to articulate and to point out those nuances, because I think that they're very important, because at the end of the day, shit in this world doesn't change unless people organize and get in the streets and agitate to make shit happen.
Right. And I think it's important to talk about the fact that even if you believe that, you know, voting doesn't change anything and electoral politics is garbage, what you're talking about here is the systemic disenfranchising of voters based on largely racial characteristics. So it is systemic racism, and that's the reason you should care whether or not you think that getting them the right to vote will fundamentally change anything.
Precisely.
It's like, imagine like you growing up your entire life where your you know, parent or whatever is unable to vote, and then, you know, you get caught up in the system and then you can't vote, and, you know, then you've got no connection to the rest of the society you live in, and that's got to feel, you know, alienating in so many ways. So
Right.
Yeah. I feel like if you in Florida, if y'all can pass a measure that people over the age of 70 can't vote, then you and Bree could essentially control the entire political system in Florida.
I really like where your head's at there.
I wonder if there should. Well, I don't know. I feel like we're getting into ageist territory here.
I'm kidding. I'm just roasting. Go ahead and say what you're going to say.
Yeah,
well, the people that do, like, when you think about, like, you know, older people in Florida, it's everybody else is like rich old people from other states,
right?
So they are assholes. Like, these are not like nice old people. They're the worst, and they cause car accidents and are just really rude. Anyway,
I interact with a lot of these rich old people at work, at my work, and so that I speak from experience. I
used to work. Yeah, I used to work at the same place a few years ago.
They are the worst. Yeah, they'll like, they burn money like it's going out of style.
Right.
And they like to say horrible things. Like the other day, there was this call, and the lady was talking about she was a landlord, right? Of course, and she was talking about how the fire alarm in her, you know, tenant's home, they had taken the batteries out of it, and there had been like a fire or whatever. And she said that she wished that they had burned because that's what they deserve for taking the batteries out of
What the fuck? Oh my god.
Yikes.
Right. Garbage humans.
Oh my gosh. That is... Wow. I was going to share a disgusting old person story. It's not as hateful as that. But we were out last night, and my partner and I, and we were waiting, and we were waiting to get some beer, and the girl, it was this like Swedish girl behind the bar, and she was like changing the keg, and she was really struggling to like lift it, and I guess it was like this old guy was there, and he was like waiting on her to... So last night was a blur. I was super hungover this morning. I don't really understand fully what was going on, but she was struggling to lift the keg, and this like old asshole is like, they don't have any men where you're from to help you? And I was what the fuck? Like, I just kind of like, and she's like, you know, just this nice, like, Swedish girl. And I was just like looking, and I had to like walk away. I was like, I can't. I'm going to say something and we're going to get thrown out, and I just can't be here right now. So I had to like walk away to where there were donuts and just remove myself from the situation. Yeah, there were donuts.
And chocolate milk, right?
Well, the thing about Florida too is that like the adage Florida is where America goes to die is very true, and so like it's not I mean, the thing is, this isn't an ageist kind of thing. It's more of a classist kind of thing. Because as Bree pointed out, it's rich old white people who move to the villages and vote for Republicans, vote conservative, and create and engender the conditions in which a state that would otherwise go towards what is ostensibly more of the quote unquote left, and actually drag it to the right, kicking and screaming.
And because they're old and they don't have children here or grandchildren here, they consistently vote for things like budget cuts to our education system and things like that, because they just straight up don't care. And then you have the majesty that is Florida public schooling. So yeah, no, that's Pearson really hit the nail on the head there.
Cool.
Yeah, but if Pearson and I were in charge of Florida, I think that we would just quit. I think we would just cancel Florida.
Cancel Florida.
It's war.
It's class war.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely.
No war but the class war.
Indeed, indeed. So the other story that I wanted to share with you guys is actually from Rolling Stone. And I know Rolling Stone, it's not like the best, but like the thing is, it's actually an article written by Molly Crabapple. And I don't know if anybody knows who Molly Crabapple is, but she is a absolutely fantastic journalist. And the thing that really enhances her journalism is that she includes drawings, and often she includes watercolor artworks with her work. And it's just breathtaking and moving and tragic and wonderful.
Nice.
And I would highly recommend checking out her work if you haven't seen it before. But the article that I'm specifically talking about is called "Scenes from an American Tragedy: The Texas Border Crisis," which is, of course, about ICE and about the CBP. It's less about the article itself is relatively short. However, I would again encourage listeners to check it out. I'm sure we can link to it in the show notes. There are just gut-wrenching bits of artwork that are annotated, and that where she has notes from what these folks were telling her, and then it also has a video, and it's just really fucking heavy stuff, but it's also incredibly erudite and insightful. And the way it ends it ends like this. Many parents at the station held yellow envelopes given to them by Catholic Charities that read, "Please help me, I don't speak English," while their kids bounced around, dancing and squirming with all the resiliency of childhood. One boy commanded me, "Draw my mom."
Wow.
That's just
Ouch.
fucked. Yeah.
Right.
I'm upset now.
Yeah, that's just heavy shit. But yeah, I would encourage folks to check that out and to continue to stoke the fires of the Abolish ICE movement, because I think that work is incredibly important, and to not forget about these people who are sitting in cages as we speak. It is an absolute crime, and it is just an inconceivable tragedy, an inexpressible tragedy, and more people need to be talking about it and not stop talking about it, and we need to be organizing and fighting against it with all of the fervor that we can muster.
I know devout Stalinist Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez made a statement about how we need to reform ICE.
Oh.
Reform ICE. Yeah. That's weird.
But I'm gonna go with abolish.
Yeah, fuck that shit. Burn it all to the ground.
Abolish and also punish ICE, because they should be punished.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
They don't get the science gulag like you two.
There's no way that ICE is not directly comparable to the Gestapo, right? Like they're rounding people up based on their ethnicity largely, and then throwing them into prison indefinitely with no charges, and then holding them in camps, right? I mean, like, why does nobody outside of the literal left, not like liberals, but the actual left, why do people not see that? Like, what is the
I think
disconnect?
the same reason that the average middle class Germans didn't
give a
see
shit.
it during, during the literal fucking Holocaust.
Because they didn't
see it.
Well,
You
because
have to live it.
I think it's like the stories that we've told ourselves for our entire lives that, America is good and America stands for freedom and it stands for democracy, and the ways in which we've qualified who is allowed to be an American and who is allowed to participate in that freedom is a particular type of person. Mm-hmm. And immigrants from the global South or Southeast Asia or the Pacific Islands, those people are not part of that story, and therefore it's very easy to just pretend like this is not really an issue because it doesn't affect me and because those people don't belong here anyway. Right? Like everybody's sort of like it's and that's probably the same way people in Nazi Germany felt that, I am a German and this person is not a German, even though they've lived in Germany as long as I have. They don't get to be German. And so what happens to them is not an issue to me.
Right.
But anyway, so I guess our topic tonight is the Paris Commune. I'm really excited because this is like, it's one of those things that I have very vague and general knowledge about, but it'll be great to learn specifics and details and ideology and all of those things. It should be noted here that Bree and Pearson, Coffee with Comrades, y'all are anarchists and comms specifically, or
mostly, yeah. I mean, that would be probably the best.
That sounds about right.
Okay, cool. And of course, for anyone who is linked to us via Coffee with Comrades, we are Marxist-Leninists. So obviously enemies to the core for the rest of time because
for this 2-hour block that we have carved out.
Because of things that happened 100 years ago and which will definitely happen again because we don't learn from history.
Exactly, which is why we want to talk about this. And when you guys reached out to us initially, that was the first thing that leapt into my mind was, we should talk about this because, like, it's not in vogue anymore to talk about left unity, which I think is for good reason. But instead, we should talk about how we can, build coalitions and work towards, actually creating and engendering the environment that is necessary for us to envision a universal, emancipatory, egalitarian, and more just world. And we can do that together, regardless of what our ideological differences might be.
Right. And I think because it's been my experience in the past, I was in the Socialist Party USA for a few years, like when I was a baby leftist or whatever. And it's a big tent organization. So they take everybody from, sock Dems to Maoists to, Black Flag anarchists. Anybody is allowed to join the party and anybody can be a part of that organization. And as you might imagine, the drama is incredible. I mean, it is just like unreal. There's like members. I don't know if I'm like revealing the secrets of the SPUSA.
Burn it to the ground.
Burn it to the ground. No, I don't want to burn it to the ground. There's lots of great people in that organization, but there's like a members only Facebook group, and the shit that goes on in there is like wild as hell. Like you would not believe the sorts of conversations that go on in there. And that's one of the things I miss about the SPUSA is like the quality drama. Like towards the end where I was like, I don't think I want to renew my membership. I would just like get popcorn and like sit in on the discussions that would happen in the members only thread. So for a while
on Twitter for a while and you'll get enough of that.
Oh God, help me. So for a while there, I was like, forget left unity. Like let's just like each organize and keep ourselves separate because this is definitely not going to work. And lately, I've sort of come around to, I guess, like a synthesis of the two, which is I think we should probably remain in our separate organizations, but we ought to come together where cooperation makes sense. Because we're never going to agree on, like, tactics, right? Like, y'all have a totally different belief system than we do. And it's fine to talk about that and what should and should not happen and what works and what doesn't work. But, like, we're not going to come together and be like, what do we do with the state? Right? Like, y'all are not going to believe the things that I believe about the state, but we can come together and say, what are we going to do about ICE? How are we going to deal with protecting immigrants? How can we smash the fucking patriarchy? Like, these are things that we agree on. Like, how are we going to fuck with capitalists?
Right.
Like, these are things we agree
How
on.
do we stop the fact?
Exactly.
How do we stop the fash? That's the big one. Like,
one.
yes, like there is a literal fascist uprising happening right now, and if we don't, like, the right is very good at putting aside their differences for their goals, and the left is fucking terrible at it. And I don't know why that is. I'm not sure exactly.
It's because of what Lenin did to Makhno in 1950.
Because of
honestly, though, I think it might be because as much as we like to profess that we're materialists, we do we have these ideals that we cling to very rigidly, and I think that on the one hand, I think that that's laudable, but I also think that it can lead to the sort of sectarian bullshit that is, incredibly ineffectual.
Right. And I would add that
and I think,
the right, they, like, so many of their belief systems and opinions are just inherently contradictory, and they're fine with that. Like, they're okay with that.
Yeah.
Right.
They can deal with that kind of cognitive dissonance because that's just who they are. Whereas I think people on the left,
so can liberals. To be
yeah,
honest,
that too. Yeah, them liberals as well, for sure. But I think on the left, everybody wants so badly to just be ideologically pure.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think, like, I will call myself a Marxist-Leninist because I think that's probably the closest to what I am. But if you're truly a Marxist or a Marxist-Leninist, then the point is you look at the material conditions you're presented with and you adjust your strategy accordingly. So, although I think, and I'm sure y'all will disagree with this, but, like, I think we should look at the Soviet Union and go, okay, what worked there and what didn't? What was successful and what wasn't? But also, what were the conditions they were under versus what are the conditions we're under, and can we adjust our strategy? I'm more a Marxist, whatever worksist, because it's like, what is the most effective thing that can happen right now, given the life that we're living and the government we're under and the police force and ICE, and, like, what is the best strategy going forward, and how can we change those material conditions? And that is dialectical. Like, you can't say I'm a Marxist and then say I'm going to follow this line and I'm going to repeat exactly the same things that happened before, because those are not the conditions that we're under now.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah. So anyway, that's my take. I don't know if you have anything to add or questions.
No, I broadly agree with pretty much everything you said. I mean, yeah, there are ideological differences, but, like, we live in a very different world than the people who we're about to talk about lived in. And I think that we have to keep that in mind, because while we can learn from them, we shouldn't cling rigidly to one side or another, like, oh, these people are anarchists, so I like them, or oh, these people are Marxists, so I like them. That's not effectual, right? Like, being able to learn from the successes and failures of both of these groups, as well as their common enemy and their failure to recognize their common enemy, is something that I think is noteworthy and worthy of our discussion.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So, moving on to the actual conversation.
Yeah, let's dig in. So
so where do we want to begin?
Yeah, just before we kick things off, just kind of a few kind of broad stipulations. Like, okay, so first, the Paris Commune, obviously,
that's not very anarchist.
What's
happening here? Shenanigans.
Anarchy doesn't mean no rules. It means no rulers.
It doesn't.
First, the Paris Commune is still one of the most hotly debated monumental moments in French history, and more broadly in the history of socialist movements across the globe. And neither Brie or I are historians. We're not experts on the Paris Commune, and there's just so much to unpack here. There have been so many books written about the subject that neither of us could ever do it justice. So instead of focusing on, like, specific dates or, like, military history, we decided to look instead at the more broad themes of the Commune. We want to talk about the Paris Commune specifically because it has those lessons that we've just been talking about for us today. day. And so obviously we're tackling it also from an empathetic angle, because I see the legacy of the communards as, both profoundly inspiring and deeply endearing. And I don't see much reason for us to interject this analysis with like a feigned academic distance. You can call us polemic, but we're on the side of the working class for better or for worse. And second, we also want to provide the caveat that we are sympathetic to both the successes and the failures, the praises and critiques of the Commune, which I think will come up in our discussion, because I think that whoever you're looking at, whether it's Lenin or Marx or Kropotkin, all these different figures have these really interesting and insightful ideas about the Commune that I think we can sort of piece together in a meaningful and critical discussion about the communards and about the Commune, in order to learn from the history and inform and instruct our contemporary struggles for universal emancipation and a just egalitarian society.
Fair.
Yes.
So yeah. Bree, you want to give us kind of like a quick kind of background about the lead up to the Paris Commune?
Yes, absolutely. So yes, like Pearson said, this is just huge, and the sort of roots of this go way, way, way back into sort of the beginning of the 1800s. But we're going to kind of just skip on ahead. So we have Louis Napoleon III. So he's the nephew of Big Napoleon, the Napoleon.
Big Napoleon.
I thought he was small Napoleon. Wasn't that kind of his MO?
We get into that, but we're not going to.
Okay.
So he's the Napoleon, the little Napoleon's nephew. And he is just this ultra conservative ruler of France at the time. He was a very sort of monarchistic, there was actually the Bonapartists were an actual political party, and they were just really, really diehard conservative monarchist dickheads, more or less. And he was basically sort of engaging in a dick swinging contest with the Prussians, and sort of went and started this war, basically arguing territory between Prussia and France, from what I understand. Again, Pearson said, we're not super interested in the military strategy or anything.
You don't need to explain. It's good.
Yeah, it's it's a lot of just, and this kind of actually all really leads up into the start of World War I, which is pretty interesting. Spring 1871, the French invaded Prussia, and they had their asses swiftly and promptly kicked. They got routed, basically. And Napoleon III got his dumbass captured, and people were pissed. So they basically the French surrendered, as French people do, and and so then Prussia came in and laid siege to Paris, and Paris was already sort of this hotbed of unrest. It's a historically very radical city. They had been yearning for change for quite some time. Specifically, they wanted their own elected city council, which is something that other French towns and cities had, other smaller French towns and cities. But the French government had consistently sort of denied this wish due to the fact that the population in Paris was large, it was radical, it was working class. It had 500,000 industry workers in the city, so they didn't want any sort of unruliness going on. Right. So basically, the Prussians laid siege to Paris. Napoleon III got his dumbass captured. Stuff was going on, people were pissed off, and basically the National Guard of Paris turned on the official French army, and a lot of the French army actually defected and joined the side of the guard, and they took their city over. And what resulted was the Paris Commune, which was a radical socialist system of self-governance that rejected the central authority of the French state, and it lasted for a really sort of beautiful and awe-inspiring 2 months, and the reverberations of this are felt today.
Yeah. So after the National Guard revolt, after they overthrow their army generals, the Paris Commune began to create these formations and federations. As Brie mentioned, Paris was always this hotbed for radical and revolutionary activity, so it's really no surprise that the Commune sprung up in this particular city. Back in the day, Paris was actually not the capital of France, and so it's interesting that after the Paris Commune and the fall of it, that's when we begin to see the transition towards France creating the Paris Commune, or France creating Paris as its capital. The people convened and they elected a council of 92. There was no president, there was no mayor, and there was no commander-in-chief. And when they were coming together, they essentially organized around two of our Brie and I's favorite things, and sort of a coalescence of
coffee and comrades.
Yeah, I mean, yes, they did have coffee in their cafes, and they did have a comradely assembly, but they created the first real version of a working class a system of self-governance. You could call it anarcho-communism, which is what Kropotkin called it. You could call it the dictatorship of the proletariat, which is what Marx calls it. But either way, it's a synthesis of like all of our favorite things. So they recognized that luxury and leisure are human rights, and they had an official program with just a bunch of stuff, but I'll list off some of the major ones. So they had a separation of church and state, which was a big deal back then. Free rent, which is fucking great, because I don't know about y'all, but I fucking hate paying my rent every year or every month. Everyone was paid the same wage regardless of their job. They abolished night work in bakeries, which is a huge issue for Parisians. They abolished the death penalty, which is kind of ironic given the legacy of the French Revolution and the guillotine. They granted pensions to unmarried companions and children of National Guardsmen who helped defend the Commune. There was a postponement of commercial debt obligations and the abolition of interest. Employees had the right to take over and run an enterprise. However, there was a kind of a little bit of a caveat, because this wasn't exactly perfect, since the Commune ultimately recognized that the previous owner had a right to compensation from their business. And then they also prohibited fines imposed by employers on their work.
Yeah, and sometimes I think that's like, I don't know if y'all listened to the episode where we had Brett on, but he talked about the fact that Mao initially was compensating business owners when collectivizing their places of business, and I think maybe that's sort of a strategic move. You know what I mean? Like, it may not be ideologically pure, quote unquote, but it's a good way to keep the petty bourgeois assholes from like coalescing into like an angry mob and trying to fight back if they're like, well, at least I got paid. It's
100%.
It's not ideal. It's better to just kill them.
Yeah, I was gonna say I can think of a better solution.
It's called the guillotine.
The guillotine.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, that's if you're not going to kill them, it's probably best to pay them at least something to keep them complacent.
Well,
I suppose.
this is kind of like
sure.
this is sort of a theme that we're gonna get into of the communards kind of going easy on people that they probably shouldn't have. When this whole, we didn't even talk about the cannons, Pearson.
Oh, we didn't.
So
Tell me about cannons.
Yeah, there's a cannon story. So this is like a pretty major event that actually like kind of kicked off the whole thing. Basically, the French army tried to, under the cover of night, like sneak in and steal this like cache of cannons that was under National Guard control, and they forgot. So like, cannons are big and they're on wheels, right? And they brought in all these horses to like get the cannons out, but they forgot the harnesses to like actually pull the fucking cannon. So they were caught by a mob of angry women. So they were caught by like a mob of like pissed off ladies who were like, what are you doing? And the general of the army, whoever was overseeing this whole thing, was like, oh, shoot these women. And that's when the army was like, nah, and they went and joined the French people, and then the general guy was arrested. and shot. I'm pretty
in
sure.
our very first episode, which is extremely rough, and I don't recommend you listen to it. But there was a very similar story during the German Revolution where Friedrich Ebert was trying to put down strikes in Berlin, and so he sent in the army to do it, and they went and surrounded all of these striking workers, and they pointed their weapons at them. But then this crowd of women and children came out, and they like started pointing at them and laughing at them and making fun of them and saying, y'all are cowards, trying to shoot fellow workers. What's wrong with you? And the army was like, oh, we're going to retreat. Yeah, like it's a pretty similar story.
Yeah, Howard Zinn talks
will be women and children.
But women and children need to make fun of soldiers, and then
yes,
that's a beautiful vision of the world. I love it. I mean that's something that Howard Zinn talks about a lot too. He has an entire chapter in A People's History of the United States where he talks about the changing of the guard and the necessity for a revolution to be successful. You have to win over the army onto the side of the revolution.
Right.
Yeah, it's part of why I think as leftists we certainly have to be extremely critical of imperialism and the methods of imperialism, but also understanding that we are not going to have a revolution without the military.
Right.
Because if you alienate the entire military, they're just going to come kill you.
Yeah, you're fucked.
Yeah.
Basically, that's the story. So.
Well, especially since
speaking
I
of,
feel like
sorry. No, go ahead for it. No,
I
go
was
for
just
it.
gonna say, I feel like especially like in the United States, like our military preys upon working class young men.
Yeah.
In a really disgusting predatory
Children,
way.
yeah.
Children.
They were in my high school. I mean, I don't know about y'all, but they were in my high school when I was a junior and a senior, trying to get me to sign up for the military.
Yep. When I was a junior, they came around, and everybody didn't have to take the ASVAB, but it was strongly encouraged that you take the ASVAB, which is like the military placement test or whatever. And then the recruiters, like fucking vultures, just come in and they're like, "Oh, so I see you got these results on your ASVAB, and we'd like to recommend you a career in." And I'm like,
and especially like now,
I'm a child,
right? Yeah, exactly. And especially now, like when the economy's in the shitter,
right?
If you want, like it's the only job that you can get where you have fucking healthcare.
Yeah.
So it's.
And when you're like a
education.
17-year-old kid who's growing up in bumfuck nowhere, like what else are you going to do? Like they really know how to prey upon the politics.
Anyway, we could do a whole episode about that. So let's move on.
Bree, speaking of women in particular and women's roles in the Paris Commune, do you want to talk a little bit about the role that feminism played and how it was both really visionary but also really problematic at the same time?
For sure. So I think that this was like this is a rough point. This is where I feel like you can really start to see the cracks that are starting to form. Like Kirsten said, there were a lot of sort of very feminist policies that were put in place. They had the granting of pensions to the unmarried companions and the children. You had what was called the Women's Union for the Defense of Paris and Care of the Wounded, which was organized by Natalie Lamel and Elizabeth Dmitrieff. I butchered both of those names, most likely, but that's their names.
Ooh.
It's a running theme in
do
our
that
podcast.
every
French
single
names
episode.
are honestly, I think, my least favorite.
So are Russian names, but
Oh,
like,
God.
that's like our shit. So
We fuck it up so
Yikes.
badly.
Yeah, I can't do the French accent. I just really can't. I feel silly, and I feel like I'm making fun of them when I try, so I don't. So they met in a cafe, and this organization, the Women's Union for the Defense of Paris and Care of the Wounded, it really recognized the intersections between the struggle against patriarchy and capitalism. And this is one of the most valuable lessons to me, and where this part of the movement really speaks to me, is that they really recognize that you can't be liberated from patriarchy without also being liberated from capitalism. The two are so intrinsically linked. So Louise Michel specifically, she was a teacher, a playwright, and an anarchist who's been called the French Grand Dame of Anarchy. And she had a vision of technology being able to liberate and luxuriate the lives of workers, fill their bellies, and eventually lead to fully automated luxury queer anarcho-communism. So that was pretty cool. And she was good friends with Kropotkin, and that explains their similar views and visions of anarcho-communism and feminism.
And love of bread.
Love of bread as
Love
well.
of bread.
Well, I mean,
So
she was
much bread.
French. So that's, they do love their bread. Women at the time...
I love bread. I have nothing. Bread did nothing wrong.
Bread has never done anything wrong.
Never.
Bread is not the enemy
No,
here.
it's not.
Bread is not. The
We
enemy.
did an episode about it.
I know. I
It's a-
listened to it. It was very enlightening.
Thank you.
I like the segment on like the advertising where it was like analysis of extreme misogyny in advertising. It was good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So, kind of going into sort of some of the contradictions of the Paris Commune, women at the time advocated for the abolition of prostitution, failing to recognize that sex work is labor and, being swerfs, which is not cool.
Yikes.
Yeah, and I mean, I kind of read it, they were looking at it as, how do I say this? So, to them, prostitution was this like predatory bourgeois indulgence that exploited the working class women, and a lot of these women had been sort of forced into sex work because the wages were so low. So they had a very reactionary position, and there was still a ton of like residual and lingering patriarchal sentiment in the commune. And also many of the workers and the communards were very heavily influenced by Proudhon, who held very, very, very problematic views on the role of women. And this is in total contradiction to the liberatory and egalitarian ideals of anarchism. And I think really helped sow some of the seeds of the commune's downfall.
I heard of this one libertarian philosopher. His name's Rothbard.
Oh.
I hear that he is very in favor of like smashing hierarchy. What do you guys think about Rothbard?
I actually don't know who Rothbard is. I'm not gonna lie.
Really?
Oh, shit.
Holy hell! So, oh man, this is a total derailment.
get off-
again.
we can't get
I'm
off of
so
this tangent.
sorry.
No.
Rothbard.
Oh, I recognize his photo.
Worse than Proudhon.
I know his face.
Rothbard, he's the like ANCAP god.
Oh.
He is the ANCAP god. He
That makes sense because he kind of looks like the Monopoly Man and Colonel Sanders had a bit.
Yes, just a little bit. He's got the
basically who
bow
he is.
tie
Yeah.
and everything. He believed that because children were not productive, they didn't have any rights. And so, because they didn't have any
I mean,
rights,
that's
they
a
were
valid
property.
opinion.
Wow.
They were the property of their parents because their parents were the ones who supported them, and that their parents were not allowed to sell their children, but they were allowed to sell parental rights to other people, so they could
fuck?
basically sell their children.
What?
He
But
totally.
But he also-
looks
he also
like
believes
somebody
that-
that would sell children.
He looks like the Keebler elf, dude.
He literally is like the godfather of ANCAP. So
Yes.
if you hate ANCAPs, you fucking hate
Yeah,
this guy.
no,
'Cause
he's
garbage.
He's the worst.
He basically he takes like the anarchist line of like no gods no masters kind of thing, and then takes it to like, but like who's really the master,
Right.
And then he's like,
Oh,
it's the person that's the strongest, that supports the most, that owns all the stuff.
Yeah.
Like it's garbage. It is fucking
Oh my
garbage.
gosh.
Listen,
Fantastic
no one
times.
hates ANCAPs more than Brie and I. I can fucking guarantee it. Oh my god, I hate them so much.
Yeah, they're,
Okay.
they're the absolute worst.
Anyway, we derailed the fuck out of you
Derailed again. I'm
No,
sorry.
I feel like that was, I don't know, it was relevant in a way. So while the Commune was progressive on gender issues, the Commune did not allow women to vote, and there were no women on the elected board. So while there were tons and tons of flaws in the gender relations department in the Commune, one thing that really inspires me personally, again, is that overall sense of liberation from patriarchy being totally connected and dependent upon the destruction of capitalism. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, don't throw the baby out for the bathwater.
Sure.
Pierce.
Yeah, for sure.
Unless you're going to make a profit on that baby, in which case...
And then, in
Sell
which case,
that
you
baby.
absolutely can. But yeah, I mean, everybody knows, too, like, you know, it was a very brief project. You know, it was 2 months of this glorious experiment before it was smashed beneath the heel of the French state. The Commune was just crushed. And, you know, the French love a barricade, but there's a lot of interesting military history about, like, how they set up their barricades poorly and how they didn't, you know, block themselves in well and how they could have held out longer. But, yeah, it was an absolute and utter massacre. And, you know, the exact number is often debated, but it's somewhere between 10 and 20,000 people were butchered by the French state, which is just absurd. Like, that is a state killing its own citizens at you know, in the thousands. Lenin observed on the Paris Commune that the bourgeoisie will stop at nothing. And this is, you know, one of the points that we want to return to in our discussion. So we have like 3 main categories for us to kind of talk about and dig into together. Okay. And we sent you that Google Doc. You're more than welcome to take a gander at it. But yeah, I mean, so we wanted to talk about, you know, this idea of the dictatorship of the proletariat. Like, what is that? Is it, you know, like, and how do we define it now, you know, over 100 years later? Like, how do we as leftists in 2018 define the dictatorship of the proletariat? I think that's an interesting question that we can kind of dig into. We also wanted to talk about, you know, Marx actually called for smashing the state. Like, this blew my brain. Like, you know, I had always, and I have read a lot of Marx's theory, but I had never read The Civil War in France. And in The Civil War in France, he like totally digs into this idea of like, yeah, smashing the state is actually a good thing. And then, you know, and then that kind of transitions into another conversation about the role of the state and specifically Lenin's critiques of Marx and Marx's reflections on the Paris Commune. So we can talk about all that stuff together. But let's take the first one first. So, you know, the dictatorship of the proletariat. In his afterword for the Civil War in France, Engels opined that the Paris Commune was a distinctive example of the dictatorship of the proletariat. And if that's the case, then I'm fucking down for the dictatorship of the proletariat. You know, this phrase is often misunderstood. It's vigorously debated, but I think it's, you know, it's worth diving into for us, especially since basically all of the revolutionaries writing at the time, Proudhon, Bakunin, Marx, Engels, Kropotkin, Lenin, Trotsky, all of them have different visions of what this phrase seems to mean. So I, you know, I'm curious, like, how do we as leftists in 2018, as anarchists and as Marxists who are interested in coalition building, how do we want to define the dictatorship of the proletariat? Like, if that is a term that listeners have never heard before, which is probably unlikely if they're listening to this podcast, but if that's a term that folks have never heard before, you know, how do we want to define that, and how do we want to create that vision for, you know, moving forward?
Right. Well, I think, so first of all, I think before we discuss what the dictatorship of the proletariat is, we should probably discuss the fact that currently we live under the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie.
Sure.
That is defined as the state serving capitalist interests and being run by, largely embodied by capitalists. So, you know, there's all these social democrats and, you know, left liberal memes and statistics that go around and talk about how many millionaires there are in Congress, right? And that's true. They then just say, let's just tax them a lot. Whatever. There's no room in a government which was established by landowning white men for true democracy, for even a representative republic. You're not going to get anything that resembles a representation of the people or a government that works for the people, regardless of what our Declaration of Independence or the Constitution may try to like fictionalize. It's all a dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. Everything works for them, and that's why there was a was it Harvard, or I think it was Harvard a few years ago, did a study that examined the rate at which particular laws pass or do not pass based on popular support. And it was roughly the same. Basically, if everyone in the country loved a thing or everyone in the country hated a thing, it had the exact same likelihood of being passed into law.
It wasn't the exact same, but it was close.
It was very close, yeah. I mean, it was within like, a few tenths of a percentage point or something. However, if wealthy people, if people in the top 20% of incomes supported a thing or did not support a thing, it was far more likely to pass or not pass. So the determination in that study was that we live in an oligarchy. We do not live in a democracy or a representative republic.
So surprise, y'all, because I'm assuming that you knew that you thought you lived in a democracy, but we just laid some knowledge on y'all.
Knowledge.
You don't actually have a voice.
Mind
right.
blown.
So again, that's dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. It doesn't matter who's in office. If you end up with a quote unquote progressive candidate, they'll either be marginalized by their party or they will be ground into the shape that the party wants them to be in. And we see it over and over and over. These people will come out with these incredible messages of we're going to move forward and we're going to provide these things and we're going to change. Bill Clinton promised universal health care in 1992. Promised it. It was one of his major platforms, and then he got elected and we got fuck all out of it.
Yeah. We got a higher incarceration rate.
Right. We got bullshit out of it. They will grind these people into shape, assuming that that's what they wanted in the first place. I take the more cynical stance that people will say whatever the fuck they need to say to get elected. But let's assume that Bill Clinton was sincere and wanted to provide universal health care the way that Barack Obama did in 2008. But once they get elected, let's take the non-cynical stance that this was something they truly wanted. Once they get into office, they are ground into submission by the system itself because the system is set up to crush that sort of change. And that's not even fundamental change. That is very, very basic. Like most of the rest of, I hate to use the word developed because that has some like colonialist connotations.
Sure.
But in the quote unquote developed world, most of them, and then a lot of the not quite yet developing, we'll call it developing nations, those people have universal health care and we do not. And so we're talking about very basic level shit and we can't get it because our country is designed not to allow any sort of threat to bourgeois interests. So anyway, I guess I wanted to define that before we get into what dictatorship of the proletariat means. So I guess, do you guys want to come forward with your definition, and then I guess we can talk about ours if it differs in any way.
I think it's interesting that Marx calls it the dictatorship of the proletariat. Or rather, he calls the Paris Commune. I want to be specific with my language. I think it's interesting that Marx calls the Paris Commune a perfect version of the dictatorship of the proletariat, and it's really interesting, and Lenin offers some interesting critiques to that, and it sort of is differentiated. But the idea of the proletariat having a control over what is done or what is conducted or the policies that are enacted within the context of their community is incredibly interesting, and obviously something that we I think I speak for both Bree and I when we say that like we aspire towards the idea of autonomy and the ability for people to have some measure of actual control over their own lives. And so what's interesting to me is picking apart the terminology itself, right? This idea, and maybe it's just because I'm a fucking nerd again, and I love the English language, because I'm really interested specifically, because I believe was it Marx who coined the term the dictatorship of the proletariat?
As far as I know, yeah.
Yeah, because I want to know what the actual translation of that word dictatorship is, because that's where for me that's where I've always started to have the problem. Because as a anarchist, the whole idea of non-consensual forms of relationships is profoundly problematic to me. And even if that means that the bourgeoisie are being forced to do a particular or certain thing, the anarchist idea of free association is something that I prize very much. And so the idea of any form of authoritarian control rubs me the wrong way, as a leftist on the sort of libertarian side of things. And so what's interesting to me is that the Paris Commune does not strike me as that, right? And Lenin, one of his main critiques that we've already mentioned was that they didn't go far enough. They didn't execute and dismember their class enemies, right? And so, a la the French Revolution or the Bolshevik Revolution, and that's one of the main critiques. And we joked about it already today, and Lenin suggests that this is what should have been done, and I'm sympathetic to that idea, but at the same time, there's a difference between the execution of someone and the battle that comes from class warfare, right? Like there's a very different tone between the authoritarian idea of I'm going to execute you versus I'm going to defend myself. And to me, self-defense is something that I can get down with, whereas execution is not something that I can get down with. And so that idea of dictatorship for me is where it becomes problematic. So if the Paris Commune is emblematic of the dictatorship of the proletariat, then like I said, I'm fucking down. But the problem then becomes how much does the creep of authoritarian tendencies and the consolidation of power come into these sorts of self-organized, self-governed communities when we instill it with this type of specific language? Does that make sense?
Sure. So I guess my question in response to that would be, what do you do with counter-revolutionaries and reactionaries and people who are trying to undermine and defeat your revolution or your established society? Like, what would be your response to that?
Yeah, no, for sure, and I don't have a good one, and that's therein lies the problem, and I think that's where one of the many critiques that people on both the left and the right have of the Bolsheviks in particular, but like, it's war, you know what I mean? And I think that's one of the things that I think is really telling and difficult, and I think it's hard for me to parse out. And part of it might be sort of a lingering idealism or a lingering. I was raised like in a Christian household, so like some of those sort of Judeo-Christian values. And so I struggle to find the way to straddle the harsh and stark reality of class warfare with building and prefiguring the type of world that I want to live in. Does that make sense?
Right. No, I get that, and it's sort of one of those things that I sympathize with, because you tend to, like, there's a point at which you must, if you're going to do that, if you're going to go that route, you are often going to have to do unsavory things, right? You're going to have to step beyond what might be morally acceptable to you in other circumstances, and so it's difficult to get past that. And it's not like I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning and is like, I'm bloodthirsty, right? Like, I just want to go around chopping heads off. But at the same time, like, what is the solution to counter-revolution? Like, and that will happen. If your revolution is anything, if it's meaningful in any way, it's going to inspire a counter-revolution, because there are people who are going to be First of all, you're threatening their livelihoods. You're threatening their way of life. But there's also people who have been brainwashed under the current system, under the current narratives, who are going to want to fight back against you. And it doesn't matter if you're an anarchist or you're a Marxist-Leninist. If your revolution is a revolution, there's going to be a counter-revolution.
Right.
And what do you do with those people?
Can I pop in? Hey.
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely. Please.
So I think that like my answer to that would be it depends, and it depends on the nature of what kind and what magnitude of a threat that those counter-revolutionaries actually pose. And ideally, again, we're all, Pearson and I are both a bit idealistic. I think ideally you would want to offer, a version of society that is more desirable to anyone with a beating fucking heart. That would be my biggest thing. And I think that one of the biggest failures, especially when you're talking about the Paris Commune, is they didn't really do the best job that they could have of like meeting the people where they were at. Right. They holed up in this fucking hotel, like this like fancy hotel, and they were just like drinking wine, and they were like, oh, agree to disagree, no night baking, whatever. Like it was. And this is kind of one of those. This is one of those areas where I actually like. I really appreciate Maoists a lot, because I feel like Maoists talk about this a lot. Where it is really about like meeting the needs of the people and really connecting with the proletariat, like meeting those immediate needs, because you talk about people's livelihoods being threatened. Well, what can we do to prevent that? And like I said, like I think it's just about making sure that what you're offering is morally and materially more desirable. And then, you're right, though. Like, there are going to be times when those sort of unsavory things are necessary. But if it were easy, if it were not morally gray and muddy and murky, then it would have happened already.
That's fair. I guess, so as far as my definition of the dictatorship of the proletariat, it doesn't necessarily have to be a literal dictatorship. It just needs to be that the class interests of the proletariat are prime, and that the bourgeoisie do not have the opportunity to undermine it. Yeah. And so and I think that's Marx's point. Like it's not literally one person has command over everything and does everything. It just means that the class interests of the working class is the only thing that matters, or the primary thing which matters, and it controls and dictates its will in whatever way that happens. Whether it's consensus or democracy or representative government or whatever, as long as those interests are the ones.
It's not necessarily, I guess, the murder of all people that disagree with you, but the liquidation of that class's power structure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right.
Mm-hmm. And so, if they, regardless, again, we're not going to talk about any of it, but if they exist, they can live, have kids, all that kind of stuff. But the power structure itself, their power over the working class folks, is abolished, is
redistributed,
is liquidated.
Right. It's rearranged in a way in which those people don't control things anymore.
And so that's how I see. We can argue about tactics. That doesn't matter. That we're not going to talk about that tonight. But
we don't have enough time to get into that.
Nah, but we can. I think again, like Jeremy was saying, dictatorship does not mean one person being like, okay, everybody's going to die. It's really who holds the power. Who holds the power in society over the other class. And if the bourgeoisie is a class and the proletariat is a class, then the bourgeoisie should hold power over or the proletariat should hold power over the bourgeois. I mean,
Tell us how you really
out.
feel.
It's coming out.
Yeah, right.
He's a super capitalist.
Wah, wah.
He's a plant.
But anyway, yeah. So the proletariat should hold power over the bourgeoisie.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, and I think that's, I agree wholeheartly, and I think that's the nuance of the definition, and I think that's exactly what Marx is saying. And like, it's not dictator in the sort of oligarchic or demagogue sense. It's dictator in the more literal sense of like, I am the person who dictates what's going to happen, right? Or
Exactly.
So this is the class that's going to decide what happens. These are
Exactly.
the lowest common denominator is going to be the people who have the power to decide what's going to be done.
And it should be because we outnumber them,
Right,
Like,
exactly.
It makes no
Right.
sense that we don't control them, but we don't because power structures,
Because capitalism.
because capitalism.
Yeah.
Right. So there were, you had 2 more points, right?
Yeah, and they kind of tie together. So yeah, we can
Okay.
kind of like make it so we're not just talking for forever. This one gets into the text. So bear with me. So in the Civil War in France, Marx contends, from the outset, the Commune was compelled to recognize that the working class, once come to power, could not manage with the old state machine. That in order to not lose again its only just conquered supremacy, this working class must, on the one hand, do away with all the old repressive machinery previously used against it itself, and, on the other hand, safeguard itself against its own deputies and officials by declaring them all, without exception, subject to recall at any moment. He goes on to cite the U.S. as a prime example of this phenomenon, talking about the sort of two-party thing. Which we've already discussed at length, so I won't touch on it again. Again, this is one of the points that Lenin in particular took umbrage with. So in State and Revolution, Lenin diverges from Marx and contends the way out of parliamentarism is not, of course, the abolition of representative institutions and the elective principle, but the conversion of those representative institutions into working bodies. But to me, that's exactly what the Paris Commune was striving to do. It didn't, it would be ahistorical to say that the Paris Commune dissolved representative bodies. Instead, it had these various federations of communards, and that's nothing if not representative. But having said that, there does seem to be that clear trend towards the gradual dissolution of representative power and a transition to more direct forms of democracy, and to me, like, that's exactly what they were doing. And so I don't really understand Lenin's critique, and so I guess that kind of plays into this overarching question that Lenin is wrestling with in that text, which is, of course, the role of the state, because the role of the state continues to be the central issue at the heart of the debate over the Paris Commune. I would dare say that it might be a bit of an oversimplification, but the Paris Commune laid the groundwork for the divide between anarchists and Marxists. Like, most of this, infighting and sectarian bullshit stems from the Paris Commune's treatment of the state, right? And how anarchists and Marxists disagreed over what ought to have been done, right? So on the one hand, you have the anarchists who argue that the Paris Commune didn't go far enough, that the communards would have had a better chance if they rid themselves of representative parliamentarian forms of self-governance and embraced a municipal federalist approach to self-organization. Anarchists also assert that since the banks and the state were not fully abolished, just kind of suppressed, that the communards left themselves exposed to the counter-revolution of the state. Now, Marxists have something of a similar critique, but they actually depart from what Marx himself wrote about in the Commune in the Civil War in France. Instead, they sort of elevate Lenin's critiques of the communards, which again propose in the State and Revolution that the problem was not that the communards didn't go far enough in abolishing the state, but they should have done the opposite. They should have seized state power and used it to help transition the commune to a working class city-state. And what's more, Lenin says that the communards didn't go far enough in suppressing the bourgeoisie and crushing their resistance, which is what we've been talking about. So all this to say, I think that it's important to not cast stones or try to persuade or debate each other, which we haven't been doing anyways, but to try and actually dig into the various holes and contradictions and flaws in both of these respective arguments, because in doing so we might be able to kind of synthesize new routes or new visions or new directions or even new strategies that we could potentially take towards forming this more egalitarian society that we all dream of and fight for and struggle towards.
Yeah, and I think first of all, it's important to note that Marx is an anarchist in as much as he's a communist, in as much as he's a socialist, in as much as he's a capitalist. His philosophy was not that this is the ideological line I'm going to follow,
Right.
and I'm going to stick to it. His ideological line was there are a series of classes which exist and have existed in the past. Some of them don't, for the most part, anymore, at least in any meaningful sense. Like feudal lords, they sort of exist in what I can't get into this bullshit.
Yeah, that's too much.
But like, so he says that there's class conflict, and class conflict occurs, and contradictions exist within systems, and that's what causes problems within them, and there will be a class struggle, and then one class will emerge victorious over the other. It's sort of like if you read Hegel, which is impossible.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. It's a nightmare.
Hegel is the worst. I just cannot get through it. It's just so
It's much better
tedious.
to let really smart people read Hegel and then summarize it for you than it is to try to read Hegel. But if you but Hegel believed in an end to history. Like there were ideas. He was an idealist rather than a materialist. So there are ideas, and this idea is better than this idea, and so it will come up in combat against the other, and then a synthesis will emerge, and then another great idea will come out, and then they'll smash up against each other, and then a synthesis will emerge, and eventually you'll get to the point where contradictions between ideas are done because we will arrive at a perfect society. And Marx sort of takes that line, although he doesn't believe that it's inevitable. It's sort of, well, kind of. Fuck, it's so much. There's so much here.
It is so much.
We don't have time to talk about it.
Look what you've done. Look what you've done.
I'm so sorry. But anyway, Marx believed that it was somewhat inevitable, but that there would be class conflicts between people, and that you went from feudalism to monarchy, and then monarchy to capitalism, and then capitalism to socialism, and then socialism to communism, and then eventually the state would wither because it would be useless.
Right.
So in the Paris Commune, I think he saw in his lifetime a real world example of what he was talking about, and it was exciting to him, and so he was like, rad as fuck. Yeah. Go to the end, go straight to that stateless society. But I think because that's what he wanted, and that's like, even if you are a Marxist-Leninist, that your ultimate goal ought to be anarchy. It ought to eventually be get rid of the fucking state. The difference is that if you are an anarchist, your goal is smash the state and we'll build our society without it. And if you're a Marxist-Leninist, you say, no, take the state, build it the way you want it, and eventually it'll wither the way that Marx said, because you won't need it anymore. It's so complicated. It's so fucking complicated. So as far as like critiques of the Paris Commune, if they had abolished that sort of municipal representative government, do you feel like it would have fundamentally changed anything? Like, would the state not have just come in and smashed them anyway?
Bree, do you have a thought on that? Because I definitely have a thought on that, but Bree, do you have a thought on that?
I feel like
I've been talking a lot.
Not necessarily. I don't think it's as simple as that, obviously, but like, I think it's more so if they had opened, like I said, if they had gotten out of that fucking hotel and just sort of like rethought,
right. Gotten to the people.
It's important.
They had real good coffee in that hotel, though, Brie. Maybe even some chocolate milk. How do you expect them to even leave
I
the lobby?
know. It's
Anarchists owned on PRT.
Stop it.
I mean, I know it was really, really hard for them to leave that, beautiful hotel with all of the wine and the bread. But yeah. I think that there is, there's definitely, like, they needed, some form of like military leadership and like organization, and they didn't have that. The military, the National Guard more or less wanted to like be an example, and they tried to just like I don't know, like nicety their way. Like there wasn't enough teeth. And
Sure.
yeah, I think that if they had not just fallen into the same old fucking trap, I think that the bigger issue to me is that they didn't, abolish the fucking bank that was still funding the French military. I think that's the bigger problem, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, for sure. Absolutely.
I think that, they needed some sort of military leadership that wasn't there, and instead they argued about things like night baking and
they didn't expand
right,
beyond
and it was the infighting
the
between
borders of the Paris
the
Commune.
Jacobins and the Proudhonists and all of those
Whether they should have single origin coffee or whether
A blend.
right pour over versus
wow
Coffee culture.
Yeah, no, I mean,
I love me a pour over though. Really do. That's
It's
probably
good shit.
bourgeois as fuck.
what
It's
pour over.
Oh my god, yeah, dude. I only do
Pour-overs,
pour
yeah.
overs. I
don't think
I'm
that's
bourgeois scum.
bourgeois.
I love pour overs. Holy shit.
Pearson confirmed revisionist.
No, but seriously, I mean, like, here's the thing. Like, whenever we look at history, it's always fun to say, like, what if,
Yeah.
what if? And I don't
Right.
think that's especially
Yeah.
effective, but I will
No, I
answer
don't
your
think
question
so.
because it's fun. I agree with Bree. Obviously, like, if they had gotten rid of the bank, or if they had seized the bank and redistributed that money, even better.
Yeah.
Then the fucking French army would have been fucked. And, like,
Yeah.
like, what a strategic short sight. Like, it's so infuriating and so, like, heartbreaking. Like, guys, come on.
Like it was
like, that was all you had to
lucky
do.
move there.
But the other big thing about it is that, like, I do think that this representative municipality thing that they did ended up creating and consolidating these 92 people into this hotel who were like talking about, hey, these are all the things that we should do, and they weren't really concerned with, hey, these are the things that we need to be doing to organize and defend ourselves, because we've created this beautiful thing and it's going to come under attack very swiftly. And so I think that if there were more voices, if there was more of an opportunity for people to participate, that yes, absolutely, things could have been different. Like, now again, that is all speculation. There's no way to know.
Sure.
There's no way to
Right.
go back in time. But I do absolutely think that things could have been different if there hadn't been a strict representative parliamentarian form of
You're
self-government.
You're talking about, like, essentially for like the leftist perspective, if you look at it from like a historical perspective, the Paris Commune was like prehistory. I mean, you're talking
Right.
about the first
Yeah.
ever real attempt at proletarian power.
Right.
That's not necessarily true. There were the diggers in the 17th century, and there was the 16th century German peasants.
Fuck out of here.
But they were. It's. God, we can't get into
No.
this. It's so like there's so much history.
So okay, let's
Yeah.
then say this. It's the first
in modern.
in
Yeah.
Yes.
communist
Yes.
in Marxist communist era.
Yeah.
It is prehistory.
Yes.
It was so premature.
Yeah.
Like they were so not ready to do that.
Right.
And it happened anyway. And we can learn a fuck ton
Yes.
from it. And regardless, it was a monumental moment in history.
Yes,
And
because it was the proletariat going, we're standing
we're
for
here.
ourselves.
Yeah, we're here.
Yeah. No, it's one of those things. Like I think we should not throw out periods of leftist history just because we don't agree with the brand of leftism they were using. It ought to be a matter of, let's look at what they did, and again, what worked, what did not work, what was their organization, what were their material conditions, and how can we apply that to today? Can we at all?
100%.
If we can't, then we can say, well, it was, this is something for us to be aware of, should conditions change. But if not, then, how can we apply those lessons to now?
Yeah. Well said.
So-
Absolutely. 100% agreed.
So it's that time where I hurt everyone's feelings.
Oh no!
Oh gosh.
Here we go.
So this is Seeing Red. For those who are listening for the first time, coming in from other places. Seeing Red is a segment where we find the hottest of hot takes on the internet, and I'm the only one who's read them before, so I've been hurt before now, but everyone else is about to get hurt. I'm sorry in advance.
Oh God.
So we're going to begin with some end caps.
Oh
So we're gonna
God,
romp
no.
our-
Oh no!
No.
No! Come on!
Throw
You do
the
us
$1
like
million
that.
baby out with the bathwater.
Oh no!
So we've got our friend Jock Doubleday. So this was in the comments section, which is always a disaster area. This is in the comments section on the fact that Chase was discovered to have been laundering money, drug money. Okay, are we ready?
Chase Bank?
Chase Bank, yeah.
I was like, who's Chase?
Yes.
I was like picturing
You
like
know
a lacrosse
Chase,
bro.
down the street.
With like a
some
fucking
Chad.
plaid shirt. Plaid.
Like, how did he get
Super
into
short
that?
pastel shorts. He's got short pastel
His mom will
shorts.
be pissed.
He's got deck shoes on.
Sorry, Chad.
No socks, deck shoes. Anyway, so Jock Doubleday. Got some Protocols of the Elders of Zion sort of shit
Oh,
happening.
God.
Oh, fuck.
Here we
What
go.
did you do?
I'm sorry. Bwah ha ha ha. The Rothschild bankers hate capitalism. In parenthesis, voluntarism in the marketplace. With a passion. End parenthesis. Because it levels the playing field.
Oh,
God.
no! Shut the fuck up! Oh my
The
God!
bankers-
Shut the fuck up! You
The bankers
fucking
are-
anti-Semitic piece of shit!
This is incoherent.
Oh, just wait. It gets better.
The bankers are monopoly men. They created the Federal Reserve to steal more than half our wealth. More than 50% of our labor goes straight to the Rothschilds in inflation and in various taxes, which is the reason that that cartoon figure is chained to his desk.
Hang on. We've got a response here
Oh.
from Molotov Pie.
I mean, I like Molotov.
Hey,
so-
Molotov Pie's got some
Solid critiques here. Bankers hate capitalism? What are you smoking, LOL? You poor deluded clown. As far as monopolies go, well, that's a central tendency of capitalism. It always works towards concentrating power, wealth, and capital. And no, bartering is not an example of capitalism.
which it isn't. Markets do not equal capitalism. Please, God.
Yeah, it's like
Stop.
literally like use your brain for 2 goddamn seconds.
So we're back with Jock. He's got 2 more responses to
No,
this.
fuck Jock. I don't want to hear from Jock. Fuck Jock. Why can't we leave on a good note? Well, from what
The dictatorship of the proletariat says no.
This isn't even the end. I've got 2 more of these. So
Oh, fuck.
yeah, I've got 2 more of these.
He wrote more than 2 sentences?
No. I
You're
mean, I've
killing
got
me.
2 more of these terrible hot takes.
Oh my God.
I'm gonna save the best for last. It's gonna hurt y'all's feelings.
Canada. Wow, wow.
Okay, here we go. So Jock Doubleday says, the title of this article should be Before the Rothschilds,
Prosperity was an option.
Oh, what?
and then growing our own food and trading different vegetables and fruits with each other is an example of capitalism.
Oh my God.
What is each person's
Oh my
capital
God.
or wealth?
Their crop.
So simple. Only
Every liberal could misunderstand it. What's y'all's take on this? Give me your response to this incredible analysis.
Why
you know,
did
we were talking about it earlier, or I was talking about it earlier, like how fascism synthesizes things from the left and the right, right? Like
Right.
they take this, like, you know, he starts off on a good foot, like he puts a good foot forward, like, hey, like there's this certain group of people, and they are consolidating wealth and they're consolidating power, and they are our enemies, and then it goes into this conspiratorial anti-Semitic bullshit
Rothschilds,
direction
right.
where it's
Yeah.
synthesizing these things, and I think that, like, I feel like fascists are the best liars
Yeah.
because they can plant kernels of truth into the propaganda that they're spewing and present it as this, you know, nice, you know, well-baked pie, when in reality it's like a fucking Sweeney Todd pie and there's human beings in the center of it.
So
Here we go. Another hot take. So first of all, there's a comment here which is just sort of reporting the facts, but the response is what's gonna really like, it's liberalism in its highest form.
Okay, so
This one's endorsed by Macron.
by Macron. ICE arrested a California man on Wednesday when he stopped for gas while driving his wife to the hospital for her C-section.
Oh, I heard about this.
Okay. She ended up driving herself the rest of the way, giving birth alone. What the fuck? Okay, so there's the what the fuck. Now here's the liberal what the fuck. Women are pretty amazing. They do whatever is needed.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god!
I'm done.
Oh my
done.
god! Oh my fucking god! Oh my fucking god! That is the most like white feminist bullshit like take. Like that's the most pussy hat take I've ever
Turn it on to the
fucking heard.
We don't give a shit.
Give it all
We
back.
don't give a shit that it was like ICE that prevented the fucking father from driving her to the hospital. It was just like, yes, perfect. She's a strong woman who drove herself to the hospital. Yes, queen. But like that was like, God. Oh, God. Yep. Okay. Are you ready for the worst one?
I'm not sure.
This is a hot take on it's on anarchism,
Oh shit!
supposedly.
Oh boy.
It's actually a hot take on Nazis.
Oh no!
They-
No! You can't do this to me. You can't.
They are anarchists. They do not believe in capitalism, government, or rule of law, and they hate the police. They are fascists. There is a response here. Capitalism, government, rule of law, and police are all part of fascism. Yes. Obviously.
Correct.
The person who made the first comment about Nazis. Hitler didn't believe in capitalism.
Oh my
And
god!
and
my
hit-
fucking god!
Hang on, it gets better.
It says National Socialism, Pearson, so I don't know what you're mad about.
Hang on, it gets better. And Hitler didn't have a government. He was a dictator in all caps.
What?
And he and he didn't have police.
What?
He single-handedly. Hitler was the Gestapo. You heard
Hang on.
it here.
You
heard it here first.
There's a deeper analysis of the Gestapo. They were the Gestapo that worked for him, and his Gestapo didn't protect the community.
Oh,
They
fuck.
stole and killed the Jews. Thanks for proving my point.
What a fucking idiot! Oh my
Do you
god!
know,
You have to.
like, what would I do for that kind of like self-confidence and like just self-assurance in my own thoughts and ideas to just
Right.
open my mouth and let shit fall out like that? What the fuck? Like,
I like. Not only do I not know anything, I am so sure I know
Right.
everything. Like I.
so confident in that response.
Like, I honestly, dude, these people, like, this is the thing that I come back to again and again and again and again with these far-right, reactionary, fascist, neo-Nazi, whatever you want to call them.
Right.
I always come back to this question of, like, do they actually believe their own bullshit? Like, do they actually believe this stuff? Or are they just saying it to be edgy and to troll? Are they just saying it because... it's countercultural. Or I'm coming to the realization that it's all of these things like simultaneously, right? Like they're saying it because it's edgy. They're saying it because it's controversial. They're saying it because it's countercultural. They're saying it because they'll get a rise out of people. They're saying it because they're trolls. But I think they also like believe this shit. Like they actually. Truly believe this ahistoric bullshit, and it's just. Oh, it's gobsmacking. I'm exhausted.
Like,
from just listening to
ostensibly-
that.
But you know what we have to do, right?
Ostensibly.
What?
We have to defeat them in the marketplace of ideas.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Debate them.
Give them a platform.
Yes. But like ostensibly, this person is like a liberal, right? Because they're saying they don't like fascists, but that fascists were actually anarchists. Which is like literally the hottest take I have ever heard in my entire life.
That is
They're
a downright
literally are
spicy
like diametric opposites. Like they are diametric fucking opposites. Like they are the most furthest apart you could possibly fucking be.
Pearson, Hitler didn't have a government, okay?
Woo!
It was just him. He was a in caps dictator.
The Gestapo was the proletariat, basically.
Oh, God.
That hurt me so badly.
Oh, my gosh.
It's so bad, dude. It's so bad.
So, I suppose that's basically the bulk of our discussion here. Do y'all have any final words or last thoughts or anything?
Yeah, honestly, like, thank you guys so much for having us on.
Absolutely.
We were really looking forward to the conversation, and it's been nothing if not, thoughtful and informative and instructional, and just really, really appreciate the opportunity to come on your guys' show and chat with you guys about this stuff and dig into these things and drink some coffee and or alcohol and laugh until it fucking hurts, which we have done.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And we had constructive conversations
Indeed.
about history. It's weird.
What a
It's almost like,
concept.
it's almost like we're basically on the same side.
Basically.
Right. I mean, in many ways, we have a lot of commonalities.
Yes.
No, absolutely.
So,
Yes.
Justin, any final thoughts?
Nah, I mean, I listen to Coffee with Comrades, and it's even though I disagree with y'all on a lot of points, I enjoy every episode. I always try to challenge myself in that way because if you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, so if you can't listen to the other side of the conversation and come out on the other side with a nuanced critique of whatever it is that you're holding, then really what the fuck are we doing?
Right.
And it's always very informative, and it helps me perfect my stance on reality, on life. Y'all help me keep up with current events because we're kind of stuck in the past. That's what we do as a podcast. And so, and that is intentional. We did that on purpose.
Right.
We felt like history was important, and y'all felt like current events was important. And I think it's ironically poignant that we ended up, on the same podcast together.
Fuck yeah.
No, for sure.
I love y'all. I love your takes. I love just listening to your banter.
Yeah,
again,
it's very personal.
Yeah, it makes me feel like I'm in the same room with y'all. So even this is the first time that we've sat down together. I feel like I know you guys, and it's just it's cool.
Wholesome.
Right on.
We love you
Fuck
too.
yeah, guys. Yeah,
We look
for sure.
forward
Who says left unity isn't a real thing?
Yeah. And thank you so much for coming on. Because I know, again, whatever. There's the rift which exists.
Listen, it's
between
all gonna get
tankies and
sorted
others,
out in a dance battle at the end of the revolution. We're gonna overthrow the bourgeoisie, and then we're going to have a dance battle.
party.
And it's gonna be fine because we're gonna win.
Emma Goldman said a revolution without dancing isn't worth having, and she was an anarchist, so sorry, we're gonna win.
Boom.
That's true. But also, now that I've seen Pearson, I can't imagine that you can dance. So
I
can't. Neither of us can either. I'm a terrible dancer.
He just does the
I guess
cabbage patch with a
anarchism
very
wins
cranky face.
because Bree can dance.
Right on. Well, hey, you guys have a wonderful night. Thank you guys again so much. It's really, like I said, no bullshit. It's really an honor to be able to come on your show. We really admire the work you guys are doing.
Thank you.
And appreciate it.
This was a lot of fun.
Thanks, y'all. And that is Proles of the Roundtable. Again, follow us on your favorite podcast app. Like and subscribe. And also check out Coffee with Comrades. They got a pretty broad range of topics. Even if you're not an anarchist, you will get some education on a lot of interesting topics. I checked out just today the one on ice, and then also on food, which is both were really fascinating and honestly inoffensive to you really orthodox Marxist-Leninists.
Oh man, Pearson, we have to step up our game.
Yeah, y'all need to be way more like antagonistic. Left book. Anyway, so in the show notes, we're going to have links to some suggested readings or documentaries, videos, things that'll help you to learn a little bit more.
Arise, ye workers, from your slumber. Arise, ye prisoners of want. That's right. For reason in revolt now thunder. Chains of hatred, greed, and fear. Ha ha! Away with all your superstitions. Servile masses, arise, arise. We'll change henceforth the old tradition and spurn the dust to win the prize. So comrades, come on and rally. Then the last fight, let us face. The International unites the whole darn human race. So comrades, come on, let's go rally. And the last fight, let us face. The International unites the whole darn human race. No more deluded by reaction. On tyrants only will make war. The soldiers too will take strike action. They'll break ranks and fight no more. And if those cannibals keep trying to sacrifice us to their pride, each at the forge must do their duty, and we'll strike while the iron is hot. So comrades, come on, let's go rally. And the last fight, let us face. The International unites the whole beautiful human race. So comrades, come on, let's go rally. Ha! And the last fight, let us face. The International unites the whole